back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey man, this time we're gonna do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everything's going well for you here on this Monday, the 29th day of July, final Monday of the month. Hope you're all off to a great start of your week. Hope you're all continuing to enjoy your summer. I really haven't gotten to enjoy that much, especially this month. As you may have noticed, I didn't do the podcast last week due to my insane schedule at work, with it being Prime Week at Amazon, requiring me to go from working 40 hours over 4 days to 55 hours over 5 days. And then we were so backloaded at work, I had to do another 50-hour over 5-day shift this past week. So as you can imagine, I am extremely physically tired right now. Sitting here talking sports for an hour or so, doing this podcast is going to be the least stressful part of my day and week. And I'm very glad to be back here and talking to you all again this week. A lot on my mind, a lot as we enter NFL training camps to talk about, with contracts being handed out, players holding out for new deals. A new deal was made in the NBA last week that I think was largely expected, that I'll give some thoughts on a little bit later on. But I wanted to center my focus to start off here with baseball, as we are now less than 30 hours away from the MLB trade deadline. A trade deadline that it took a little bit of time for some teams to start getting active, for some moves to start being made. As I said in the last podcast I did, I think the trade deadline needs to be moved back a little bit, because you still have a time here where there are not a lot of teams that have defined who they truly are. There's still a lot of teams that may think they're in the mix of things, may think that they're alive, with the fact that you have 3 wild cards in each league. Keeps more teams alive, but it allows for there to be less sellers. Now, it does a good thing for those teams that are selling, because they can jack up the prices, but you still have a lot of those teams that are in the in-between point, that are not quite sure what they truly are right now. But after about 4 months of baseball, I think we know what our two locals truly are, the Mets and the Yankees. And we have two teams that are looking to make a drive toward the postseason, two teams that have been going in completely opposite directions over the last month and a half to 2 months. You have the Yankees, who got off to a 50-22 start, looked like world beaters, looked like the best team in baseball, and for the last 7 weeks have forced their fans to want to put their head through a wall, going 13-24 in that span, and being a team that either can't pitch on one night to support their offense, or can't put up enough runs to support good pitching performances. Quite frankly, the Yankees should be very fortunate, should be counting the lucky stars that they are still alive when it comes to the American League East. Hell, if the Orioles had actually played even somewhat slightly decent during that time, the Yankees would be, 7, 8 games out as far as the division race is concerned. But they're lucky that the Orioles have been on a below 500 slide in their own right, and that's allowed the Boston Red Sox to get back in the mix of things, although the Yankees took 2 out of 3 from them over this past weekend. But that doesn't cover up the anger, the annoyance that I had with the Yankees last week, as they continued to get embarrassed this season by the New York Mets. The Mets, who completed the Subway sweep over the Yankees in the Subway Series, winning all 4 games that these two teams played this season, doing it in pretty much dominating fashion. There was only one game that was really close, that was really competitive. That was last Tuesday night's game, when it didn't seem like the Mets could tack on those extra runs late, had plenty of chances with the bases loaded late against the Yankee bullpen, and really couldn't stick the dagger in their heart, leaving it alive for that shaky Met bullpen to have Met fans nervous heading into the 9th inning. But to the victor go the spoils, and I must tip my cap, even though I'm wearing it backwards right now, to the Mets and their fans, because the Mets have played with some spunk these last 2 months. The Mets have played with some energy, some fight, some fire, some determination, even despite how bad their bullpen is leading up to Edwin Diaz, even despite the fact that they really have gotten nothing out of Kota Senga this year, the guy they expected to be their ace. And they finally get him back on Friday night, and in typical Mets bad luck fashion, they lose him for the season after just one start. In the weirdest of fashions, he's just moving out of the way on the mound on a pop-up, steps the wrong way, and strains his calf. Now they're in all likelihood going to be without him for the rest of the regular season. And even if they make the playoffs, who knows if there's going to be enough time for him to come back and make a start or two for them. But that wasn't the most deflating thing for the Mets this past weekend. The most deflating thing is the fact that you had the chance to step on the throats of the Atlanta Braves. The Braves, who are dealing with all sorts of injuries right now, dealing with injuries in their lineup, being without Acuna, now losing Albies to a broken finger. They lose Reynal Lopez yesterday after about 3 innings to an injury. But still, the Mets allowed the Braves to have a life here after a dramatic walk-off win on Thursday night. Then hitting home runs left and right on Friday night. The Mets forgot how to hit these last 2 games. Got smoked by the Braves yesterday. Got shut down by this kid Spencer Wogelback, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, on Saturday. Were in a checkmate situation when it came to the Braves, when they could have really started to distance themselves. They had taken control of that top spot in the wild card, but these 2 losses, while it's not going to cripple their season, it's not going to spell the end of them as far as their playoff chances, definitely kind of calm some of the momentum. Now they've got to hope to spark their inner New York Yankee and take care of business against the Minnesota Twins this week, as well as if they want any chance at the division, albeit they're, 9-10 games back as we speak, they got to root for the Yankees against the Philadelphia Phillies, which has got to be a very awkward position for any Met fan to be in. But the concern for both of these fan bases right now has to be on what their top baseball executive, in the Mets case, David Stearns, in the Yankees case, Brian Cashman, do in the next 24 to 30 hours before Tuesday night's 6 p.m. trade deadline. There are needs for both of these teams. Even before the Mets lost Kodai Senga, and I say lost with air quotes because really did not have him. One start, they made this entire comeback and putting together an actual real season without him. He would have been just a nice cherry on top. Even before losing him, I think they needed to add another starting pitcher because Tyler McGill looks like a bullpen guy. David Peterson you really can't trust. And then you have a bunch of guys in that rotation that don't go very long. Quintana and Sean Manaea are really 5 to 6 inning type pitchers. Severino has pitched really well, setting himself up for a good payday, but we know that there is an injury history there with him. He has not pitched a full season, made a full season worth of starts in a very long time. So you want to not just go get a starting pitcher, but you want to go get a top of the rotation type guy. There are some of those guys available. There are really, when you look at the crop of pitchers available at the trade deadline, there are 4 that sit on top of the rest. There's Tarek Skubal and Jack Flaherty from the Detroit Tigers, Blake Snell from the Giants, and before you laugh and say, oh, Blake Snell has been awful, yes, his regular season ERA looks awful, but for the last month, he's looked like the best pitcher in baseball. And then there's, of course, Garrett Crochet of the Chicago White Sox, who that's going to be fascinating to see how they handle his situation, because either they're going to trade him tomorrow to some contending team, or you're going to start to see, as we head into the month of August, them convert him into a reliever role, considering this is his first full year as a starting pitcher, and just last year he's coming off of Tommy John surgery. Those are the kind of guys that the Mets need to look into. Or maybe there's another team that has a top of the rotation pitcher that we're not thinking about right now as a seller that they can get to bite. I heard over the last week or so, David Cohn on one of these ESPN broadcasts bring up the idea that maybe the Mets should go get their old friend Chris Bassett from the Toronto Blue Jays. Someone at that level or better needs to be added to this Mets rotation, because they've added to the bullpen. They've added to the lineup with going and getting Jesse Winker. But they haven't added to the bullpen that knockout guy. They haven't added that top elite arm. They've added some guys that are veteran relievers in Phil Maton and Ryan Stanek over the weekend. And while Maton is solid, I have no trust in the world in Stanek. Stanek reminds me a lot of former Yankee Kyle Farnsworth, where he throws the living crap out of the baseball, but you cannot trust him in the big spot. Even got booed off the mound at Citi Field yesterday after giving up 2 home runs in his first appearance. You need that no doubt guy, because right now you got Reed Garrett on the IL. You've got Daniel Nunez on the IL. Both of those guys look like they were clearly overworked. You can't keep relying on the likes of Adam Ottavino and Jake Diekman to get the ball to Edwin Diaz to close these games out. You need some surety at the back end of these games. And right now, you don't have that, especially with the way that they use this young kid Buto as more of a multi-innings, all-purpose weapon out of the bullpen. You'd like someone that brings a little bit of more lockdown ability in that bullpen. That right there are the 2 things the Mets need. Top of the rotation starter and back end of the bullpen guy. Whereas with the Yankees, they got off to a nice start as far as this trade deadline is concerned. Going and getting Jazz Chisholm is a good move on several fronts. A, he's athletic, and the Yankees lack some athleticism in this lineup because there's really no threats on the base paths for this team. But now you add him to what you already had with Anthony Volpe. That's a little bit of speed mixed into this lineup. There's also this youthful enthusiasm with this guy that is very energizing for a fan base as long as he does perform, and can kind of change up the mood in that locker room because it's a very corporate-like atmosphere, very business-like atmosphere for the Yankees. Now getting a guy like this in here that brings up so much excitement, so much energy to the table can maybe get them out of their stuck in the mud ways, can get them to act like they're actually having fun playing baseball. Plus, with his versatility, the ability to play the outfield. I know he hasn't played it much this year, but playing the infield as well. Put some pressure on some people. Put some guys in position where maybe their spot in the lineup isn't as comfortable as they once thought. And I'm looking directly at Gleyber Torres, at Alex Verdugo, and DJ LeMahieu. LeMahieu, who, quite frankly, just looks like a mannequin, looks like a stick figure at this point. Verdugo, who I know he hit well over the weekend against the Red Sox, but has had a large stretch here where he has been a total non-factor for this team. And then there's Gleyber Torres, who I think is the direction of a lot of Yankee fans' animosity right now, having one of the worst free agent seasons that you can possibly have. The fact that Chisholm can play all of these positions, play the outfield, play second base, possibly even play third base, could put some pressure on those guys. But that cannot be the only move here. That cannot be the one sole move by the Yankees at this trade deadline. It's a good start to things as far as moves are concerned, but it can't be the end-all, be-all move. It needs to just be the beginning of what is an active stretch here for the Yankees. I don't want to hear from them tomorrow night saying, oh, we tried, the moves weren't out there, the moves weren't of our likings, and that they're viewing Giancarlo Stanton returning tonight in Philly, or the soon returns of the likes of Clark Schmidt and Scott Effenross as their deadline moves. I think they need to add a starting pitcher to this staff with how you saw Stroman and Cortez struggle over the weekend, and we know that Stroman is a bad second half pitcher, and Cortez is just awful on the road. Plus, he just brings a negative vibe to him. This is a guy that was running his mouth after the MLB All-Star game when the Yankees that were there were getting booed by the Texas crowd, and he's on Twitter saying, everyone wants to be like us. Everybody wants to be Yankees. And since then, he has getting knocked around the ballpark in his 2 starts since the All-Star break. And on top of that, he's got a 6 ERA on the road. He's just a flat-out negative vibe, a batting practice pitcher that I want them to get the hell out of here. But the Yankees could use a starter to add to this rotation, even with how well Carlos Rodon has pitched his last 2 starts, because it cannot just continue to be the Garrett Cole, Luis Heel show. And they definitely need to make some upgrades in that bullpen. I'm thinking at least 2 new people need to be added to that pen. And we're talking strikeout guys, not these continued shopping at Kmart type relievers where you hope to get lucky. No, you need some guys that bring heat, bring nasty stuff out of that bullpen, and that are going to miss bats. I saw the other day that they were interested in former Yankee Chad Green. That is a move that I would greatly welcome. There have been guys that I've heard over the weekend that they're interested in, whether it be Kyle Finnegan of the Washington Nationals, Pete Fairbanks of the Rays. Even at one point, people thought that was a close to done deal, but it doesn't seem like the case much anymore. Though I would be a little bit weary of trading with the Rays, and I'll get to that in a moment. The guy that I really was hoping for over this weekend is Tanner Scott from the Marlins, and maybe that still happens at some point. But you need to add strikeout guys to this bullpen. The likes of Luke Weaver and Mike Tonkin have been nice stories, but you can see they're starting to get worn out. They've been used way too much. Clay Holmes, for as hard as he throws, is a pitch-to-contact type reliever and is someone who would be better off outside of the closer role, especially since he's blown 7 saves so far. So those are what the Yankees and Mets need to do. And they need to get this done in these next 30 hours, because I say this all the time when it comes to these teams. Not just the Yankees, Mets, any team in contention looking to make moves at the trade deadline. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. Tomorrow is not always going to be there for you. I mean, look at the Washington Nationals, how they handled the Steven Strasburg situation. It took them a long time to finally get over the hump and win that one title. Now, they'll tell you in the end it was worth it, but they went through a lot of pain, a lot of heartbreak on the road to getting there. You've got to strike while the iron is hot. You've got to strike while the opportunity is right there in front of you. And it's right there for both the Mets and Yankees. I know I'm sounding like Aaron Boone right now, and I hate when he says this during post-game pressers, saying, oh, it's right there as he's banging the table. But strike while the iron is hot and take this opportunity. It's not guaranteed. The Yankees are not guaranteed to have Soto beyond this year. The Mets are not guaranteed to have Pete Alonso beyond this year. Not guaranteed to have Luis Severino beyond this year. And you don't know what you're going to have out of these prospects that you're holding on to for dear life and refusing to trade. I'm not saying trade all of them, but make some moves here. Give your team the best chance to win and give your fan base something to be excited about heading into the final 2.5 months of this season. A lot remaining in this podcast. Give you more on the trade deadline coming up, mixing some thoughts with the NFL as it really pays to be a quarterback right now. And talk about some basketball as well with Team USA, their big performance yesterday, as well as a potential little controversy that took place in that game. So a lot to get to over the next about 40 minutes or so here. Glad you guys could join me this week. And as I tell you each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, help put your feet up, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
So with the trade deadline less than 30 hours away now, action started taking place over the weekend. The team that was the most aggressive, some will view it as a little bit of a surprise, but I'm not as much surprised about it because it's been kind of their MO over the years. They don't march to the same drum that many other franchises would in the spot that they're at. But the Rays traded away 4 players over the weekend, starting late Thursday night into Friday morning when they dealt Randy Arozarena to the Seattle Mariners, who's having a bit of a down year, but the Mariners needed some offense with the fact that Julio Rodriguez and J.P. Crawford are on the IL right now. And they've been on a slide that no one quite has been talking about. A month ago at this time, they had a 10-game lead on the Houston Astros, and now they're currently looking up at the Astros in the AL West standings. So they needed to add some offense, add some power to that lineup, and that's something Arozarena has always been capable of. Plus, he's a guy that's not afraid of the big moment. Remember, he came up as a rookie and was a rock star in that postseason of 2020 that got the Rays to the Bubble World Series. So he's someone that could very much help the Seattle Mariners. Then the Rays started trading away from their pitching staff, trading Zach Eflin to the Orioles, showing they're not afraid to trade in the division. Orioles desperately needed to add a starter as they've lost 3 members of their rotation to Tommy John surgery already in this season. And traded reliever Jason Adams to the San Diego Padres as the Padres cling on for dear life to that wild card spot in the NL. And concluded this weekend with trading Isaac Paredes to the Chicago Cubs, even after there were rumblings that the Yankees and the Dodgers were in somewhat of a bidding war trading for his services. Kind of a surprising move in some people's minds, as they're 2 games above 500 and just 3 games back of that third wild card. But this is the Rays that we're talking about here. This is a team that always will trade a player or move on from a player too soon rather than too late. Some of it due to their budget concerns, but also they seem to always be the smartest ones in the room on a player. They've turned guys that were outright trash elsewhere into very useful pieces, very useful players for them over the years. Take, for example, someone like G-Man Choi, who was kind of a run-of-the-mill journeyman and then went there and was their first baseman for a rather long time. So they've always been able to make it work. And I don't view this as them giving up on the season. They've always been a very feisty, very pesky team. Kevin Cash has always kept this team in the mix. Since the point that they changed their name from Devil Rays to Rays, they've never bottomed out and been just amongst the dregs, amongst the worst of the worst. Even in a down year, they've still been in contention into the month of September. So I wouldn't expect them to all of a sudden become everybody in baseball's doormat. But you saw some of these contending teams make some moves, put themselves in better position heading into October, especially the Phillies adding Carlos Estevez from the Angels to add to their bullpen. And I would make him the closer, even though Alvarado has held that job for most of this season. Because as we've seen, Alvarado, while he's a good reliever, has been a kryptonite for the Phillies at times in the postseason each of the last 2 years, especially 2 years ago in the World Series against the Houston Astros. He struggled big time late in some of those games. And Estevez is just having one of those years that you see from a reliever every once in a while where they go from being really good to just being lights out dominant. Now, it's not going to just all be on him. He's joining a very good bullpen that's been headlined by the likes of Jeff Hoffman and Matt Strahm this season. But if I'm the Phillies, with a day before this deadline, you've added to this bullpen now. You added to this lineup with the trade with the Orioles for Austin Hayes, sending Sir Anthony Dominguez to Baltimore over the weekend. The Phillies should look for another starting pitcher. It doesn't have to be amongst those rock stars that I mentioned earlier, those dominant frontline guys, but someone just to add some depth to that rotation, because Ranger Suarez started to struggle as we headed into the All-Star break. Give a little more depth there behind Wheeler and Nola, and really just go for it. Go for that home run swing if you're the Phillies. You've been so close the last 2 years. You were in the World Series 2 years ago. Last year, you were a win away from getting back to the World Series. You've been the best team in the National League so far this year. Treat your fans, treat your team out there in the city of brotherly love to a nice midsummer Christmas gift, and go get a starting pitcher to really put yourselves ahead of the pack heading into the final couple months of this season. Now, I mentioned the Orioles went and got Zach Eflin from the Rays. They should not be done when it comes to looking for starting pitching. They should not be done as far as adding to that rotation when you consider all of the injuries that they've had. And they've been in the mix when it comes to these top of the rotation pitchers that are possibly available. They've talked to the Giants about Blake Snell. I'm sure they've talked to the Tigers about Jack Flaherty. Tigers need to really think hard about trading him. I don't believe that they're going to trade Skubal. I think it's going to take someone backing up a Briggs truck to get him, considering he's not a free agent until after 2027. But Jack Flaherty is on a 1-year deal, is pitching to a 2 ERA over his last 7 starts. Even though you're kind of dancing around, teasing contention for that third wild card spot, go out there and trade Flaherty and see if you can find someone that will give you something really, really good for him while his value is at its highest. Because there's no guarantees that this guy's going to be a Tiger after this year. What are you going to do? Hold on to him, fake contention, miss out on the postseason, and then just get some kind of draft pick at the end of the year? What's that going to do for you? What's that going to help your chances to build for the future? Continuing to build around Skubal and some of the other young players that you have out there in the Motor City. The interesting one to watch over the next day is Garrett Crochet. I mentioned earlier about how it's his first year back as a starting pitcher after he came up to the big leagues as a reliever these last couple of years and is a year out from returning from Tommy John surgery. But now you're seeing some reports where he's kind of set his own no trade clause here, where he's telling teams that if you want me to pitch as a starter for you going down the stretch, I want a contract extension. And on one front, you look at it and say, kid, who the hell are you? It's your first year as a full-time starting pitcher. You're going to be making these kind of demands. But he is 1 year away from free agency. This is a guy that has dealt with some injuries in the past. Mentioned the Tommy John surgery before. So he wants some security added to him if he's going to risk himself like this, if he's going to put himself out there and go way beyond any kind of innings limit, any kind of workload that was imagined for him this season. It'd be a very weird thing to see if, say, he gets traded tomorrow and then he refuses to report to said team because they're not giving him an extension or giving him the extension that he wants. In reality, I don't think Crochet or Scooble are going to be moved. I could see possibly Blake Snell because maybe somebody gets desperate, especially the Mets looking for a starting pitcher could say, we'll take him on knowing that he could opt out of his contract after this season. But Jack Flaherty is the one that really needs to be traded. And there's some teams out there. We've talked about the teams that are definitive sellers heading into this deadline period. The Marlins, the Angels, the White Sox, Rockies, and A's. But there are teams out there that really need to be sellers. Move on from anything that is not definitively nailed into the ground as part of their future. Not just the Tigers, but the Cincinnati Reds, who are 5 games under 500. I'm not saying trade Ellie De La Cruz, but a guy like Jonathan India, who's very highly sought after. The Washington Nationals. People are chasing after them for Kyle Finnegan out of their bullpen. And then there's the interesting case that is the Toronto Blue Jays. The Toronto Blue Jays, who have probably been amongst the most disappointing teams in baseball this season, would be probably better served trading away the likes of Bo Bichette or Vlad Guerrero Jr., but they would be entering a full-on rebuild mode there. But let's face it, they've made the playoffs once with those guys. They haven't really won anything. They've been that team that keeps teasing, keeps dancing around contention, spent a lot of money on a starting rotation that, while Berrios and Gausman have been very solid, a team that has just not lived up to the bill, not lived up to the hype of being Canada's team. They've got pieces that people would push down walls to get to better their chances. Not just Guerrero Jr. and Bichette, but Chris Bassett. Someone would love to have him as part of their postseason rotation. Or the guy that I would like the Yankees to go out there and get for their bullpen, Chad Green, is having a great year, has shown to be a very good reliever in this sport for a very long time. They've got to stop fooling themselves, stop teasing themselves that they are something they're not in these next 29 to 30 hours and move on from some of these pieces. Yeah, it sucks to be in rebuild mode. They can get a treasure trove of prospects back if they were willing to move on from some of these guys.
I'll be back.
Boy, does it pay to be a quarterback in the NFL. Even someone who has not a lot of experience, has not played many, many years, but if you're with a franchise that trusts you, believe in you, they'll pay you a fortune to be with them for a very, very long time. We've already seen this offseason massive extensions for Jared Goff, Trevor Lawrence, and now this week 2 more jump to the front of the table with big extensions. Guys that do not have really large track records, but had great endings to their season last year and got paid for it. First, there's Jordan Love. Jordan Love, who I think back to around Halloween time last year, where the Packers were 2-9, struggling. He was not playing great. And people thought, Green Bay, see, it's not that easy. It's not that easy just to keep lucking into franchise quarterbacks after having 30 years of the combo of Brett Favre into Aaron Rodgers. We were all laughing at them, poking at them, but they got the last laugh on us as Jordan Love turned things around, and in his final 8 starts of the year was awesome. Was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, threw for almost 4,200 yards, had 32 touchdowns, only 11 interceptions. In fact, in those last 8 games, he had 18 touchdowns, just 1 interception, and completed 70% of his passes, got the Packers to the playoffs. They destroyed the Cowboys in the first round and came within 1 drive of beating the San Francisco 49ers to continue their run to a possible Super Bowl. And he did this with a team that largely predicated on young wide receivers, not any big standouts, any big names in there. I know Christian Watkins was missing some time due to some injuries, but Jordan Love really played well in that last 8 games of the season and in the postseason. But it's led a large debate here. Has he been deserving of this contract? Is he getting this deal too soon? Or are the Packers just banking on the fact that that was the beginning of even more greatness to come, and they're getting him at a relative discount? Because he and his agent were already saying he was not going to practice until he got a new deal. And as we're seeing all the time, all of these quarterback deals continue to go up and up and up. You don't want to get to the point like a certain team that I'm going to get to in a few minutes and just have your backs up against the wall when it comes to your deal. So I figured, yeah, he's probably not worth being one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league just yet. But you don't want to get to the point where you see more of these quarterback deals coming on the board and you're like, shit, we could have got him for $55 million and now we're instead having to pay him $65 million. So I thought this was the right move for the Packers to make. The other quarterback extension that was finally done over this week is Tua Tagovailoa. And there is no doubt that Tua Tagovailoa is very talented. And there was a reason why once upon a time he was the 5th overall pick in the NFL draft. But getting $53.5 million a year, $167 million guaranteed, I don't know, kind of a stretch for me when it comes to Tua. It's because of the fact that, I think he's capitalized greatly on having Waddle and Tyreek Hill there. Those guys have made him more so than he has made them. B, we've seen he's not played well in cold weather, especially that playoff game last year against the Kansas City Chiefs. And C, last year was the first year that he played start to finish. Every year there had been some kind of a hiccup with him, whether it be injuries, whether it be dealing with concussion problems. Something has always popped up when it comes to Tua. Poor performance and getting benched for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Something's always popped up for this guy that has not allowed him to play a complete season. Being the fact that he is clearly a warm weather quarterback. He's got a lot to prove in cold weather situations. That's why the Miami Dolphins have got to dominate the months of September and October and pretty much win every home game possible that they have to get the 1 seed in the AFC. Otherwise, if they make the postseason, they're screwed. I can't see them going with Tua to places like Kansas City, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Buffalo, possibly Pittsburgh, and winning playoff games. Because it's cold as you know what in the month of January. It's not going to all of a sudden the sun comes out and be 75 to 80 degrees for him in those places. So he's got to prove it in the big spot, prove it that he can handle cold weather situations. Otherwise, I know the Dolphins had been looking for their long-term answer since Dan Marino retired. They're going to keep on looking. They're going to keep on struggling if this guy does not pick up his game in less than advantageous weather situations. But both of these contracts getting done, all of it's done is put pressure on one team, the Dallas Cowboys. Because the Dallas Cowboys can sit here and act like, oh, everything's fine, the sky is blue, the grass is green, the sun came out today. But it's not fine. Each day that passes, the price just goes up and up and up for Dak Prescott. Each day that passes and you see another quarterback get a contract extension, it just put the Cowboys in a more hellacious position. Because I don't expect Dak Prescott to go out there and once again be the runner-up for the MVP. But I also don't expect him to play like dog crap to the point where it's going to hurt his market. There's going to be teams vying for his services next year if the Dallas Cowboys are not willing to sign him. And it's going to put the Cowboys in a worse screwed position here when you consider you don't know what the hell Trey Lance is. You still got to work out a contract for Cee Dee Lamb. You got Micah Parsons a year away from really getting paid big time. And he hasn't gotten a new deal yet. And you're still haggling over when you're going to pay Dak Prescott. It makes no sense to me how they've handled this situation, that they did not get his deal done before the likes of Goff, Lawrence, Tua, and Jordan Love, that they've let those deals get off the board before getting something done with Dak Prescott, especially at a time where Cee Dee Lamb is holding out of practice. He's not even showed up at Cowboys training camp because he wants a new deal. He saw what Justin Jefferson got. He saw what Tyreek Hill is getting paid. He wants his bag. He wants his treasure trove of money and is not stepping foot on the field until he gets his coin. If you're the Cowboys, you're just in an awful spot right now because you've got three guys that have grossly, and I mean grossly, outplayed their rookie contracts. In the case of Dak Prescott, he got paid once. Now he's looking to get paid again. And it could hurt your opportunities in order to fill out the rest of that roster, in order to build the rest of the necessary depth that you need on that team to try to get over the hurdle and try to win a Super Bowl for the first time in 29 years. Even with the situation they're in, though, there's a team that I don't think it's getting talked about enough that is in a worse spot than the Cowboys when it comes to backs against the walls. And that's the San Francisco 49ers. Because they've got two disgruntled players right now looking for new deals. Brandon Ayuk has made it clear and obvious this entire offseason. Either pay him top of the market wide receiver money or trade him. And the 49ers don't seem inclined to move on from him, don't seem inclined to trade him. And why would you? You got George Kittle getting older. Jennings is not as surefire and locked down as Ayuk. You still use Debo sometimes in some of these running back packages, and if he goes down with an injury, then you're hurt in your wide receiver depth. Christian McCaffrey is starting to get a little bit older as well. Plus, you're still in the midst of the greatest sweetheart deal that has ever existed in the NFL. The fact that you have been able to take Mr. Irrelevant, just out of pure dumb luck, take Mr. Irrelevant and turn him into a very successful winning quarterback. But you're getting to that point with Brock Purdy, where this is year 3 of his 4-year rookie contract. You're not going to be able to pay him Mr. Irrelevant money beyond the next 2 years. He's going to look to get paid at some point, as are a lot of guys on that team. You look at their defense, Tre'Davious Ward, Lenore, Greenlaw, they're all set to be free agents at the end of this year, as well as a couple other guys on that team. And they've got 8 guys on that team right now making $9 to $28 million per season. And that's not even including dead cap money. That's not even including the fact that now left tackle Trent Williams is holding out over a contract dispute here. The 49ers have reached, more so than any team in this league, more so than the Cowboys, more so than the Cincinnati Bengals, no matter how things go with their negotiations with Jamar Chase, more so than I think even my New York Jets, who I'll get to in a couple of minutes. They have reached now or never mode. Because you're not going to be able to keep all of these guys, both Greenlaw and Ward especially, beyond this year. It would be organizational malfeasance if they tried to pay every single one of these guys, and the salary cap will not allow it. So them more than any other team is under the gun, under pressure to finally win a Super Bowl this year. Otherwise, that team is going to start to break apart. They're going to miss out on this grand opportunity to win with this dynamic, awesomely talented team, while your quarterback is still on a Mr. Irrelevant level contract.
I'll be back.
Well, what was one of my worst fears has finally become a reality, as the NBA agreed the other day to that new $1.8 billion per year mega deal with Amazon, ESPN, and NBC for their media rights for the next 11 seasons, starting in the 2025-2026 season, thus ending an over 30-year run that they have had with TNT, thus meaning the end of Inside the NBA. And I had held out a little bit of hope for this to continue there, especially when last week I saw that TNT matched Amazon's $1.88 billion offer for television rights for them to be part of the deal alongside ESPN and NBC rather than Amazon. But unfortunately, the NBA decided to take Amazon's deal. And I know that TNT is going to try and sue over this, claiming that the NBA breached contract in their statement, saying that the agreement they agreed to in 2014 states the NBA may not enter an agreement or agreements with a third party or parties without giving Turner Broadcast a chance to match and accept it. I think it's a nice try by TNT to try to hold on, but I think in the end they're going to lose this battle. And I guess it's fitting that it is going to be the end of Inside the NBA, considering that Charles Barkley had recently said that next year will be his final year in the broadcast business, that he's going to retire and move on to other things in life. But I, like many other basketball fans, that show has been such a big part of my life, especially when there are those occasional Thursday nights where there's some meh doubleheaders on. Those four, Ernie, Kenny, Chuck, and Shaq, always keep you entertained. And even beyond just the realm of sports, they're not afraid to talk about anything. If there's something going on in the world that is impacting things, whether it be a pandemic, whether it be social issues, whether it be gun control, whatever it may be, they'll touch on it. They'll give their opinion on it. People may not like it, but they're human beings. They got a right to express themselves. May cause some controversy at times, but they're always blunt and honest about their opinions and entertaining in the process. And it's just going to stink not seeing them on my TV set together anymore after this year. So rest in peace to Inside the NBA. Hope you have an awesome final year together. I didn't get to watch it yesterday due to being at work, but Team USA was able to hold on against Serbia. Especially Serbia gave them a fight early in this game, but what was really uplifting for them was when Kevin Durant came in off the bench. Even after not being able to practice, not being able to play in any of these pre-Olympic games that USA was playing in due to some calf issues, was perfect from the field. Him and LeBron James led the way. The only controversy coming out of it is Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton weren't playing. But you have to remember, it's a 40-minute game. Shorter games than an NBA game. With that, you're going to have a smaller rotation. You're going to probably play 9 to 10 guys at the most. And with the fact that even though I think both of them, especially Jason Tatum, is a much better player than either Drew Holiday or Derek White, those guys bring something defensively to the table that neither Halliburton or Tatum can really match. They bring defensive matchup nightmares that the other team really has no true counter to. So yes, normally I'd look at it and say, oh, Derek White's the 12th man on the team. Why is he getting playing time over Jason Tatum? But strategically, at least in Steve Kerr's mind, it made a lot of sense. And there'll be times throughout this Olympic run, you're going to see certain guys are not playing for whatever reason. Maybe it's a poor matchup that doesn't work in their favor. I'm sure there may be a game along the way here where maybe someone's crying out loud that, oh, Joel Embiid is not playing as much. Or maybe Bam Adebayo is not playing much. Although he, to me, has been one of the three guys that has really seemed comfortable in his role between him, LeBron, and AD, because they're playing the role that they normally would have played for the Lakers and the Heat, respectively. But you're not going to see all 12 guys play in every game, every night. Team USA is going to work on matchups, work on trying to out-scheme the other teams, because these other teams, they have players. It's not just the Team USA Invitational anymore. We saw it in these games leading up to these Olympics. Some of these teams got players, and these teams could put a scare into Team USA. Maybe even on the right night, catch them for an upset, especially when you get to the quarterfinals and semifinal rounds of this tournament. Now, I want to finish off with talking about my Jets, and there's two things that have been on my mind these last couple of weeks. One, the Jets are not getting Davante Adams. All right, everyone has been overreacting to one comment by Aaron Rodgers while he was at the American Century Golf Tournament a couple of weeks ago when he said, quote, "I love Davante. I can't wait to play with him again." Maybe he was talking about playing a round of golf with him. But everyone has ran with that comment and assumed that the Jets are going to trade for Davante Adams because maybe he's not happy with the quarterback situation out there in Las Vegas. And their quarterback situation is nothing really to write home about. They signed Gardner Minshew. They've got a couple of young players there, no one that truly projects to be a star. But they gave him the head coach that he wanted. They gave him Antonio Pierce. And him and his agent have already come out and said that he's not looking for a trade. He's not looking to move on. So I don't understand why everyone keeps making this a headline. Everyone keeps making this a story. The real story that we should be talking about with the Jets, and this is the other thing I wanted to get to, is how badly the Jets have handled the Haason Reddick situation. And I'm not sure, I still haven't quite put my finger on it, whether it was Joe Douglas or if it was Haason Reddick. But clearly, someone has lied in this scenario. Clearly, someone is not telling the truth when it comes to the details about this trade and their negotiations for his contract. Because the main reason he got traded from the Eagles, he wanted a new deal. Back when he signed his original contract, he was one of the highest paid edge rushers in the league. Now, that $15 million is good for 20th amongst edge rushers. He's turning 30 at the end of September, and he has been fourth behind Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, and Micah Parsons for sacks in the last 2 seasons. And he wants to get that one more big payday while he's still in his prime. Eagles weren't willing to go there, so they trade him to the Jets, sign Bryce Huff. And there was thought to be an understanding between the Jets and him on how this was going to be handled. He said he would show up for all of the mandatory off-season practices and training camps. Wouldn't be a disruption. That's all turned out to be false. The Jets and him seemed to be in agreement that he was going to play this year under his deal, and they'd either negotiate during the season or sign him to a new deal afterwards. But he is pushing the issue now, and it has me as a Jet fan concerned. I know we're only a week into training camp. You've got to get a deal done with this guy. You cannot have a scenario like my worst fear manifest itself, where you head into the season, he's still not here. You say, agree to some kind of new deal the week of your first game. And all of a sudden, that first game, he pulls a hamstring and he's out until October. This is one of the most important players on that defense, right there with Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner. Get the deal done. Make some kind of good-looking 3-year contract where you front-load the guaranteed money for him, where it looks like a 3-year deal, but you can get out of it really in 2, and get this deal done. Otherwise, I'm telling you, Jets, you're going to come back and pay for it big time. Either he's going to get hurt, or when he does show up, he's going to ball out to the point where he's going to be asking for something that is even more outlandish, that is even more beyond what you were hoping to pay him. And then you're going to lose him after just 1 year and end up having to give up a second-round draft pick to the Eagles for this guy. Get the deal done. Get it done now so that there is no problems, nothing holding you back heading into a year where you've got Aaron Rodgers coming off of an injury. You've got an improved offensive line, but a lot of age on that offensive line. And Mike Williams coming in on a 1-year deal, and he's never been able to stay the healthiest guy in the world. Put your team in the best possible position and take away all nerves that Jet fans have heading into this season, rather than us waiting for the sky to fall on us with the same old Jets mentality. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, July 29th, 2024. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. You get one life, people, so you might as well try to live it up. And I'll talk to you guys again, same time next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody.
I have had enough of you!
Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to smell you. Now leave.
I'll be back.